There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Matthew. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store.
So the Pharisees, they would have been considered to have been the conservatives, because these guys, they believed in all of the Old Testament scriptures. And the party itself was made up of any male Jew who wanted to follow their way of life and their teachings. But these people, they were also the legalists. And their rabbis, they were the ones who had made up these rules upon rules for everybody to follow. They burdened the people with rules. But they also believed in miracles, and they believed in angels, and they also believed in a resurrection. Where the Sadducees, they believed in none of that. They believed the exact opposite. They didn't believe in miracles, and they didn't believe in angels, and they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. They only believed in what you could see with your own two eyes, and they were considered to be the liberals. They only believed in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They only believed in the writings of Moses, and they accepted nothing from the books of the prophets or from the Psalms or from the Proverbs or anything that wasn't written by Moses. And they weren't just made up of anyone. They were mostly made up of those who descended from the line of the priests, from the line of Aaron, Moses' brother. All the high priests, they were Sadducees, and they ran the big business in the temple in Jerusalem. In fact, the name Sadducee is derived from the name Zadok, which was the first high priest that served in Solomon's temple. And the only thing that these groups could agree on is that Jesus was a threat to their business of religion, and they needed an alliance to be able to take him down, because they were afraid that Jesus would end up ruling Israel. But where Jesus came to rule, he didn't come here to rule in Jerusalem. Jesus, where he came to rule in the hearts of men and women. He wasn't trying to conquer the land, but he was trying to conquer the people in the battlegrounds of their own individual hearts, to those who would receive him willingly, those who needed a Savior. Because Jesus, he has the power to transform lives from death to life. And so now this alliance of Sadducees and Pharisees, they come together, and now they're asking Jesus for a sign from heaven. And this word means much more than just a miracle, because they've seen sufficient miracles and they're dismissing all of them. And that's even though those miracles that they saw were actually the direct fulfillment of all the prophecies of the Messiah that they found in the scriptures. But now what they're doing is they're asking him for a demonstration of power. They're asking for an astronomical sign, like something like bringing fire down from the skies. And they're saying to him, if we see this, we will believe you're the Messiah. And this is the second time that the Pharisees had come to Jesus and asked for this type of sign. The first time was back in chapter 12. And then Jesus confronts them here, and he says, well, you guys, you can discern the signs of the sky about weather. And that's kind of like our saying that we have red sky at night, sailor's delight, red sky in morn, sailor take warn or be warned. Or I was never a sailor. I don't know those sayings real well. I've heard it though. And he was telling them that where they could tell that a storm was coming by the color of the sky, but now they can't see and discern the coming of the Messiah. And what they were ignoring here was way much more than just the color of the sky, because they're having to ignore what they see, and they're also having to ignore the scriptures, because they are seeing the scriptures fulfilled. And just like the first time when they asked Jesus for a sign, Jesus here, he gives them the same answer that he gave to them the first time. He says that the only sign they're going to get is a sign of Jonah. And he was talking about his death, his burial, and his resurrection. And it'll all happen in 3 days. And all of these guys, they will live long enough to see this sign because this is about to happen in less than a year. And if you ever notice, Jesus never terrified people into believing in him by signs of power, by pulling the fire out of the sky. And he can do stuff like that. But Jesus, he draws people to himself by relieving them from their burdens in life and by loving them. And that's because Jesus is gentle, because Jesus is a shepherd. And so Jesus, he doesn't stay and he doesn't argue with the Pharisees and Sadducees. He leaves them and he goes to the other side of Galilee. Okay, now the disciples, when they catch up with Jesus, Jesus tries to tell them about this encounter he just had with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And Jesus tries to warn his disciples about their false doctrines and their false teachings. And Jesus, he describes it to them just like that parable of that small amount of leaven that the woman placed in the 3 measures of meal, which ended up corrupting all the meal. And so Jesus, he warns his disciples of the leaven of the Pharisees, because what they're teaching is spiritual corruption. And leaven is always the symbol of an evil influence. But these guys, his disciples, well, they're not on the same page as Jesus, and they're not understanding him at all. Because as soon as Jesus said the word leaven, all they started thinking about is how they forgot to bring the bread. And so these guys, they can't understand spiritual things that Jesus is saying because their minds are set on the earthly things. Their minds are set on lunch. And they're not even going to the place where they're even asking Jesus what he's talking about. Because it says, they're just talking among themselves and they're trying to figure it all out on their own. And so the best thing that they could come up with on their own was, well, Jesus, he's just upset that we didn't bring any bread, until Jesus interrupts them because Jesus, he knows what they're thinking. And then Jesus calls them you of little faith. So he calls them little faith. And it seems like this happens to be a name that he's starting to call them on a regular basis. He's not calling them no faith, but little faith. And that's because he wants to develop them to be men of great faith, like the centurion and like the Canaanite woman. And so what he basically says to them, he says, when did I ever depend on you guys for bread? Don't you remember me feeding the 5,000 and the 4,000 and all the leftovers? I'm not worried about bread. And then Jesus speaks plainly to them about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And then the disciples, they understood what Jesus was talking about. That was about their false doctrines and their beliefs. And this is all because these disciples, they only thought naturally. They didn't think spiritually. And probably because they were out of bread, they were probably thinking that Jesus was warning them about buying unclean bread, the kind of bread that Jews can't eat, bread filled with leaven. So after this discussion, Jesus and his disciples, they travel up to Caesarea Philippi. And in Israel, there is 2 Caesareas. There is Caesarea Maritime, which is on the coast of the Mediterranean, a very lovely place. And then there's Caesarea Philippi, which is about 25 miles northeast of the Sea of Galilee. And Caesarea Philippi was very steeped into pagan religions. And at one time, it had been the center of Baal worship. It was also called to have been the birthplace of the god Pan, which is that Greek god who was the nature god, with the goat legs. A lot of times people will picture the devil with the hooves and stuff like that. And all these shrines, they're all carved in to this mountain. And in this mountain, there's a cave. And so they have all these shrines, they have all these pillars, and it's all filled with idols. And even Herod the Great had even built a shrine there to the Emperor Augustus Caesar. And if you went there today, you would know why people had chosen that place to go worship, because it's full of nature and it's very beautiful. It's kind of like going into a retreat in the woods. It's got flowing streams running all around, and it has all these ornate pillars and shrines everywhere. And this was like a shopping mall where you could worship any pagan god or any deity you wanted to worship. It was kind of like the one-stop shopping place. It was kind of like going to the food court at the mall. The streams, they flowed into this cavern that was built into the huge mountain with the shrines carved into it. And if you go there, some of the guides will tell you that that's called the gates of hell. And then you kind of wonder, you say, well, why is Jesus taking his disciples to a place like this? Why is he bringing them into idol land? And this is the place where the Israelites had fallen into idolatry so many times before. And Jesus there, what he does is he asks his disciples two questions. And the first question he asks them is, who do men say I am? And he calls himself the Son of Man. And so they start with what Herod Antipas was saying about Jesus. And he's saying, well, some say you're John the Baptist, and some say you're Elijah or Jeremiah or one of the great prophets. This shows us that there was a great confusion among the people, that they didn't really know who Jesus was. And if you notice, the disciples, they didn't even mention here that people thought Jesus was the Christ, even though that was the rumor that was going around. Now, if you ask this question in any Sunday school of who Jesus is, every hand would shoot up and every kid would say, Jesus is the Christ. And that's only because we were taught this. But to these crowds that Jesus actually ministered to, they weren't really sure who he was. They did know that he might be some kind of prophet because he did these miracles from God, just like the prophets did. But it wasn't so obvious that Jesus was the Christ. And it might be because he didn't look like what they thought a Christ should look like. Maybe they thought, well, I would always think that the Christ, he should have been taller, or maybe he should have been better looking. And you'll notice there's no description in the Bible of what Jesus looked like as a man, and there's no historical record of what Jesus looked like. But in Isaiah 53:2, Isaiah describes the Christ, and it says, he has no form or comeliness, and when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. And so Jesus, he doesn't have a glowing halo around his head. Jesus, he just looks regular. And then Jesus asks his disciples the second question, and he says, who do you say I am? And Peter's hand shot up without hesitation. He says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, this is a question that every person is going to have to answer for themselves. And all of us, we will be judged by how we answer this question. And it's not so much by what we say, but it's more by how we live. And Jesus here, he makes quite a big deal over what Peter's answer is.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.